Welcome to TSN Inside Sports. I'm Dave Hodge. Basketball has fights like any other sport, maybe not as many as hockey, but the announcement of fines and suspensions from the Office of NBA Commissioner David Stern is a regular occurrence. This is a story about a different kind of basketball violence at a level far removed from the NBA. An increasing problem in high school basketball, particularly in a big city like Toronto, is violence that is connected to but not necessarily part of a game. It may be that a meeting of two rivals in a gym is nothing more than a convenient excuse for the proliferation of violence that is seen elsewhere in school corridors and on street corners. But if that's the case, the sport of basketball suffers just the same, more than it should, and some players find their careers and schools, their programs and reputations seriously affected. Understanding the problem is difficult enough. Solving it is even tougher. More in this report from TSN's Thomas Forrester.
Basketball has exploded on the high school sports scene in Canada, especially here in Toronto, where more than 50,000 boys and girls play on school teams. There are approximately 50 tournaments each year involving more than 800 teams. Recently, however, a disturbing trend has developed which has seen a dramatic increase in violence in and around these tournaments. For the most part, the violence is not on the court, it's in the stands. In fact, it's become so bad that tournament conveners have had to take the drastic step of excluding certain schools and their followers from these tournaments. And in some cases, they've had to change the formats of long-established and prestigious high school tournaments.
The problems that we experienced, we had some people, we had a little snack bar, and we had that robbed a couple times, and some other damage done, to the school. And we found that in many instances it wasn't, kids who were going to high school. It was people that were out of school and, just sort of came to, cause trouble rather than, watch the game. And we find that in the afternoons we don't attract that kind of person,
David Grossman has been covering the high school sports scene for the Toronto Star for more than 15 years. He's chronicled the change in the basketball environment over recent years.
As far as I'm concerned, the game has changed drastically. And while the quality's improved immensely, it's the loonies and the kind of things that are going on in the stands, at games, that are detracting from the quality of it itself. Like people charging out of stands to attack players, the cursing that's going on, the win at all costs. We go to a basketball game to see kids play, the talent. I won't go to a basketball game now unless I'm assigned.
Security has become a major concern at many of these tournaments, especially those taking place at night. It's not unusual to see up to a dozen plainclothes and uniformed security guards and police at a tournament such as the Jarvis Collegiate Invitational, one of the longest-standing annual tournaments in the country. For the fans who attend these tournaments, the extra precautions bring them some peace of mind.
Now, in a way, it kind of ensures me that everything's going to go well, because I've been to some games where people are throwing things on the court. The crowd is kind of out of hand. Like, knowing that the security is there gives me a comforting feeling, knowing that, everything's going to go well.
When I was in high school, it wasn't as bad, but, there was still friction and stuff like that, but it's just getting worse and worse each year, and there's nothing you can do about it, really.
Marv Pearl is the convener of the Jarvis tournament. He's had to adapt to the changing dynamics of the high school hoop scene.
I and people in the position that I'm in running tournaments have been around a long time. We know the situation. We know what's happening. There are problems, and some schools create bigger problems than others. And to be honest to our own students, to the school community, to the facilities, we try to avoid these problems, preclude them from occurring. And so there are some schools that you have to think 2 and 3 times before you will have them here.
A school with one of the worst reputations is Westview Centennial, located in the heart of the Jane Finch corridor in North York. In 1993, Westview attended a tournament just north of Toronto where the fans got so out of hand the tournament had to be canceled. A 16-year-old player on one of the teams was assaulted with a knife, suffering a 17-stitch cut to his face.
We were in a timeout. We were playing Westview, and we looked over. We heard a bit of noise on the other side of the court. We saw a teacher arguing with a couple of students, and they started shoving a bit. The next thing I knew, the court was flooded with people from the stands, and we were backed up into a corner. I reached out to grab a friend who looked like he was about to get into the fight, And as I spun to turn him away, I was hit from a blind side and struck with a knife.
There have been several other documented cases within the past 2 years. 2 weeks after the Brampton tournament, Westview was scheduled to play in another city tournament, but was told not to attend. Since that time, it's been next to impossible for them to get invited to any tournament.
I feel really badly for the guys. I feel badly for our school, who have a nice bunch of guys representing them this year. And, I mean, people should be able to see this team. I wish somebody would invite us to a tournament. We'd love to come. We'd be there in a flash. We drove 350 kilometers to Sarnia because we got invited. We played some good basketball. We treated their fans to some good basketball, and it brought us a lot closer together. If we had 3 or 4 more tournaments like that, who knows? We'd have a really worthwhile season. Right now, it's a frustrating season.
Michael Smith is a sociology professor at York University, specializing in studies of violence. He says there are several reasons for this violent trend.
At one extreme, you could consider these sorts of rises revolving around a social issue or problem or conflict of some kind. 2 groups in conflict on the basis of, say, class, race, nationality, geography, or some other deep-seated division use sports as a forum to act out their differences. And in these particular cases, I think the athlete or the team, as the case may be, are representatives of the group in the stands. And when an athlete or team is victorious, then it's a victory for the in-group. And when there's a defeat, then it's a defeat for us.
There are 2 trends here. Basketball is gaining in popularity, and we live in a society where violence is on the upswing. Unfortunately, the 2 have met head-on. Actions off the court have definitely affected the kids who just want to play on it. For TSN Inside Sports, I'm Thomas Forster.
Next up, a man who has... A bit later, we'll hear more from a couple of the people who spoke. We talked to one of the most experienced and most successful high school basketball coaches in Ontario. John Petroshak, whose Red Men from Runnymede Collegiate in Toronto are a perennial powerhouse. He might have thought he had seen it all in high school basketball, but these days that means seeing things you never thought would be part of the atmosphere in a high school gymnasium. John, defining this subject may be the first problem in trying to understand it. I wonder if there is a difference between violence in high school and violence in high school basketball.
No, do you want me to? I don't think so. It is violence in basketball is no different than violence in the school or in the stands. I don't think the violence is on the court itself. I don't think it's between players. I think it's between fans that come, and usually it's not fans that are involved with the schools. It's usually outside people that are just there to watch so-called basketball game. Is the focus then unfairly on the sport, and does the sport suffer unduly because of all that is perceived? Oh, I definitely think so. I don't think the sport has anything to do with violence in the stands or violence anywhere in schools. These kids that work hard for their respective basketball teams do it in the academic field and on the court, and they're perceived sometimes in the wrong way. And having coached for all these years, I can see that it is not the fault of the kids on the court. And because you've been around for all these years, you're the perfect one to ask about when this began to occur. You remember a time, and so do I, when we wouldn't have been discussing this because there was nothing to discuss. At what point did you see a problem beginning? Probably about 4 or 5 years ago. You could just see the competitiveness of the game, the competitiveness between schools building, and sometimes something had to give. In Scarborough, there were some great tournaments up in Pearson, but 3 years in a row that the top teams were in this tournament, there was always a violent act during one of the games, and some of these people on in the stands just don't care what's going on the court, and they come spilling on the court because they've had some disagreement with somebody, and they don't care whether they stop the game or whether the game ever finishes. So what have you tried to do about it? Well, you talk to your kids. You always talk to your kids, whether it be in practice, whether it be on the court. You always tell them that The extension of what they do in the classroom, what they do on the basketball court reflects on them and on the school, and it's very important for them to be perceived as leaders of the school.
So they have to ignore what goes on in the stands. How easy or difficult is that? And they also have to try to make sure that they don't do anything that will provoke the people who are watching?
Sometimes it's very difficult because sometimes when it spills out in the court, and as I said before, these people don't care spilling out on the court and what it affects. You have to just call your people. You come back, and usually they're very good about it. They come back to the bench, and then they just watch what's going on. And once it's over, we get back to basketball.
But what would you do if one of your players did something that obviously was meant to enrage the other team or its supporters?
Well, fortunately, that's never happened before. But if it did, the boy would know right away that he would not be part of the team. There would be definite measures taken to that not happening again.
It is said that an obvious police presence might be the best way to stop things from happening, and it is also said that that would be too expensive. But if that's going to be successful, can you afford not to find the money?
You have to try and find the money. It's been shown that the big tournaments that with the people that have shown up for some of these games, sometimes it's 3,000, 3,500 kids, you have to have the uniformed police. They may not do anything, but just their presence invokes a fashion that people know that they just can't fool around at a basketball game.
What about closing the gyms? When we hear talk of parents causing trouble at minor hockey games, sometimes they're not allowed in. And maybe if basketball fans at high school games cause too much trouble, they shouldn't be allowed in.
It's been talked about, Dave. The coaches, the administrators have talked about that sometimes just let the two teams play, no spectators, and just the referees, the coaches, and the players. But again, I think from a school perspective, the teams play for their school, and it's very important to have the spectators there. Usually it's only a few, and usually it's not from the competing schools that ruin a basketball game.
Does this sadden you, John, that we're even talking about this, that it's an issue that's worthy of discussion, or do you accept it as part of everyday life?
It's a thing that's been happening. It's probably it's going to continue to happen. It just has to be monitored.
Thanks for talking with us about it.
My pleasure.
Coming next, the unfortunate case.